Hello everyone, welcome back to Hearthstone. Today I'll be continuing my Hearthstone Basics series. Not quite where we left off. I left off having completed the tutorial last time, and unfortunately I would have had to have played at least 8 games, and they would have all been fairly boring had I recorded them, so I went ahead and played those off camera. And what those games did was purely to unlock the other classes. So we played Mage through the entire tutorial, and then Mage is then the only class that you have unlocked after that point. So here are your classes, and I'll go over each of them quickly and over each hero power. So we started off with just Mage, and then we had to unlock every other class by playing against the computer as that class. So I'm just going to go top left to bottom right and go through each class and their hero power. I'll also go over what kinds of decks are typically found in those classes. So first we have a Warrior. Warrior's hero power is gain 2 armor. So armor is effectively health, except that you can gain armor even when you are at 30 health. So it's like extra health, but you could effectively have as much armor as armor cards there are in the game. So with a health-based hero power, Warrior is a very defensive class. So typically they try and make, you'll see a lot of like anti-aggro decks. So they'll have a lot of taunt minions, they'll have a lot of cards that generate armor. So you'll have those. You'll also have control decks, which are decks that want to just stay alive until you hit like the 9-10 mana range, and then they just start playing really high value, really big cards and make you deal with them while they stay alive. Next we have Shaman. Shaman's hero power is summon a random totem. So there are 4 totems that you can summon when you use the Shaman hero power. One of them is a 0-2 taunt. One of them is a 0-2 with spell damage +1. And one is a 1-1 that has nothing special to it. And the last one is a 0-2 totem that at the end of your turn heals all other minions on your side of the board for 1 health. So, and it says summon a random totem, so it's random. There are things that interact with the hero power, and you can manipulate it a little bit better. Oh, Shaman. Shaman decks are... Shaman's kind of weird. You'll see a little bit of everything in Shaman. Shaman's had good aggro decks in the past. It's had okay combo decks and okay control decks. The only deck that I can think of off the top of my head that's ever been really, really strong was an aggro deck that revolved around Overload. And Overload is a Shaman-specific mechanic where typically you'll have a card that's really good for its mana value, but then it has Overload attached to it. And what Overload does is it restricts how much mana you have the next turn. So I will show you a Shaman card that has just that. So this card, wrong click, Feral Spirit, you get to summon 2/2/3 wolves with taunt. So a 2/3 minion with taunt So we don't have any 2/3s with taunt. Let's see if there are any... Oh, no, that wasn't plain text. I want to see if there's a 2/3 with no extra text on it. I don't see one. But so here's our closest guess. Yeah, so you could also go with this one. 3 mana, 2/4 taunt, and echo. Echo is another keyword. I'll try and cover that some other time. It's a really neat effect. So a 3 mana 2/4 with taunt is better than a 2/3 with taunt. I wouldn't say it's quite a whole mana difference, but this is just one. So you're getting 2 of almost these for 3 mana. So you're getting a lot extra in this card than just like playing a minion that's a 3 mana 2/3 with taunt. But then Overload 2 means the next turn you have 2 less mana that you can use. So it's a little bit of a drawback, but typically cards with Overload are really good on tempo, which is being efficient with your mana and putting good minions on the board, or spells with really good effects. Shamans also tend to have a lot of elemental minions. Elemental is like a tribe, so the minions, excuse me, if you're not familiar with World of Warcraft or Warcraft, elementals are a type of being, and there's a bunch of different elementals. You can have them of every different element. So that's a tribe that's not specific, but is very heavily featured in Shaman. Murlocs have also been very heavily featured in Shaman. And I'll go back to Warrior. Warrior's never really had a great tribal-based deck. So they never had elementals or murlocs until recently. This most recent expansion, Warriors now have a really good mech-based deck. Other than that, the other thing that's prevalent in Warriors are weapons. Warriors tend to have good weapons, or at least decent weapons, but typically Warriors and Paladins, sometimes Rogue, get really good weapons. Speaking of Rogue, Rogue is next. Their hero power, equip a 1/2 dagger. So the Rogue's hero power gives you a weapon with attack 1, durability 2. So since Rogue has this weapon, you can do 1 damage twice. The only thing that you have to do is pay the mana cost for the hero power and whatever health you take in attacking the minions. So rogues are typically really good at tempo because that weapon works really well to help remove early game minions. So they're really good at getting ahead on the board early and steamrolling that into a win. Things that have been prevalent in Rogue, they've never had a whole lot of tribal based decks. They had a little bit of mech synergy in the very first expansion, but it wasn't because the mechs synergized with each other. It was a lot more because the mech cards that Rogue got were just really good. So, occasionally you'll see good Rogue weapons, like I mentioned. A lot of what you see with Rogue is combos. In fact, the word combo is a keyword in Rogue, which means it gets an extra effect if you've played a card before it. And I'll see if I can find a good example of that. So this is a good one. So 2 mana, 2/2, which by itself is a really good, or it's an average 2-drop. But combo, summon a 2/1 Defias Bandit. Defias Bandit is just a 2/1 with no text. So if you've played one card before this one, for 2 mana you get a 2/2 and a 2/1, which is really good. Because a 2/1 is roughly 1 mana, depending on if it has text on it. It could be a 2 mana card. So you're kind of getting like 2.5 mana out of this card if you can use its combo, which is what makes combo cards really good. This is a very classic rogue card that has a combo on it. So Eviscerate, 2 mana, deal 2 damage. Combo, deal 4 damage instead. So you play one card before this and it doubles its damage, which is really good. Rogues have also had Death Rattle synergy in the past. In fact, Death Rattle Rogue's a pretty good deck right now. It is a little expensive. Requires a couple of rare cards and legendary cards. But Rogue's really good, especially in Arena. Rogue is one of the top classes pretty much always in Arena. So next I'll move on to Paladin. Paladin's hero power is summon a 1/1 Silverhand Recruit. Silverhand Recruit is just a 1/1 with no text. However, in the past, and I think a little bit to this day, they have cards that synergize with the dudes that come out of their hero power. So, if you see a paladin using his hero power a lot, you need to not necessarily just let them go. Those 1/1s can be pretty scary if they have a couple of cards that'll synergize with them. Paladin's kind of seen the whole range. It's had really good aggressive decks. It's had decent mid-range decks, and it used to have a really good control deck. However, the control in the mid-range decks are no longer nearly as good, but Paladin to this day still has one of the most oppressive aggro decks. If you have, a bunch of money or a bunch of patience and you can just wait to get all the cards, the top tier Paladin aggro deck is a really good deck. A lot of things that you'll see in Paladin are buffs. They have a lot of spells that'll buff your own minions. They also have a lot of spells and other abilities that change the health and attack of minions in general. So that could be things like buffing your own minions, setting a specific minion's health to a specific value, to things that you can do on your opponent's cards, like you can set an opponent's minion's attack to 1. You can set all minions on the board. You can set all of their healths and attack to 1. So Paladin has a lot of equalizing effects where it makes everything the same. They do tend to see a decent amount of weapons. Typically their weapons are mediocre. You'll have a good one that comes about every once in a while. But typically they see a lot more buff kind of cards than they do weapons. Hunter. Hunter's hero power deals 2 damage to the enemy hero. So you can't target this on minions, you can't target it on anything. If you click the hero power, you will deal 2 damage to the opponent's hero. So This hero power synergizes very well with decks that just deal as much damage as quickly as possible. So Hunter, I don't want to say always, but almost always has been a very aggro heavy deck. In fact, one of the decks that either at the end of this video or another time I'll go over is it's called Face Hunter. You just throw all of your cards on the board and try and hit your opponent in the face and just try and win as quickly as possible. A lot of people don't like Hunter because of how bad all of their other archetypes are. Hunter does have a really good mid-range deck, but it tends to work very similar to an aggro deck. It just has some bigger stuff in it, but it still kind of operates like a face deck. Druid, their hero power, you have one attack, plus one attack, and you gain an armor this turn. So, it's one of the few hero powers that gives a 2 health change in one turn. So if it's your hero power versus like a mage, the mage can only do 1 damage a turn. You can deal 1 damage a turn, but you also gain 1 armor a turn. So you heal for 1 and you can deal 1 damage. You're going to do better than a mage when it comes to just hero powering. But it does require you to attack, so you do sacrifice some health if you're going to use it on minions. Druid, like Paladin, has seen good aggro decks, good mid-range decks, if you could call them mid-range decks, and very good combo control decks. In fact, one of the big things that a lot of people are complaining about right now is Druid seems to have like 4 or 5 different good top tier combo control decks. And it's because a lot of their base cards are really good at kind of stalling the game, making sure they hit the later turns, and they can out armor a warrior, and a warrior has a hero power that gives them armor. So their druids are pretty ridiculous right now. Druid is a good class to get into if you want to start working towards a top tier deck. Warlock. Draw a card and take 2 damage. So you're dealing 2 damage to yourself to draw a card, and you're paying 2 mana. So Warlock has been really good at what we call zoo decks. Basically, you just have a bunch of good, but on the cheaper side, minions that either synergize really well with having a lot of minions on board, or do specific things to make it hard for your opponent to get all of your minions off the board. And because of that, when you play a bunch of cards, you'll run low in your hand. The Warlocks can life tap, and they can draw an extra card each turn. They do have to be careful because they can put themselves in peril if they get themselves too low on health from life tapping. Warlocks have seen zoo decks. Zoo decks are very good in Warlock, but they've also seen very good, I don't know if I'd call it a tempo deck. There used to be a deck called Handlock, where on turn 4 you could play an 8/8 minion just from your hand. And that was a really good deck really early in the game. It was one of my favorites. But they also have a good control deck right now, but it is also very expensive. But it is also very good. Mage. So Mage's hero power, we've seen it before, deals 1 damage. This one is targeted, so you can choose anything to deal 1 damage to. Mage is kind of goes back and forth from like one expansion to the next between whether they're a really good tempo class or a really good control class. And right now they're kind of on the tempo side of things. Um, there are a couple of combo decks that are okay in Mage. They take a lot of skill and a lot of practice to be able to pull off consistently, but those kind of decks typically are my favorite, and Mage has always been one of my favorite classes. So in the future, when I get to just playing random decks and decks that I think are fun, you'll be seeing a lot of Mage. Last class is Priest. So Priest is about healing, hero powers restored to health. Priest does have a lot of healing cards. The other class that's really big on healing is Paladin, but they don't have a whole lot of it. They have a little bit here and there. Priests have a decent amount of heals. Priest has pretty much always only ever been a control class. They've never had a decent aggro deck. They've never really had a good mid-range deck. Um, there was a deck, it was called Dragon Priest, and it was mid-rangey, but it was still very heavy, like it had a lot of high-cost cards. So it was, I don't know how much I would really call it mid-range. It was still fairly kind of control-y. All of their minions in the early game, the whole point to them was to keep them alive to get to their bigger cards. Priest doesn't have a whole lot of like tribal affiliations. That's something I skipped over on a couple of classes. Mage has had mech synergy, like in the first couple of expansions. Mage had a good mech deck. Now they get elementals, but other than that, they don't see a whole lot of tribal affiliation. Warlocks have their own tribe, and it's demons. Demons are usually good minions that have a drawback to them, or they're just decent minions to begin with. Druid, they've Blizzard has tried to push Beast Druid a couple of times, but it's never really taken off, and Druid doesn't have a whole lot of other tribal affiliations. Hunter is all about beasts. There's a lot of beast synergy in Hunter, and typically the ones that you'll see are the good beasts that are good in aggro decks. There are other beast synergetic cards that are a little bit more like control style or even combo style, but you don't see those a whole lot because Hunters just, the thing they do best is play aggro. So you don't see it a whole lot. Paladin doesn't really have a whole lot of tribal affiliations. They did have a decent Murloc deck. They've had two versions. They had a combo Murloc deck that was pretty good for a while, but then aggro decks just got too fast, and a lot of the key cards rotated out of standard. And I'll go into standard and wild probably in the next episode. But they had some cards go out of the more popular game style. So that deck kind of fell off. And then they had a decent, like, zooey, like, almost aggro Murloc deck. But other than that, they've never had a whole lot of good tribal affiliation. I'd just like to take a second to thank you for watching this video. And if you have any suggestions or comments, go ahead and leave them in the comment section below. If you liked the video, please give it a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.